Hello everyone, I am Dr. Raina Chawla and today we will be discussing important questions on cesarean section and the steps of a cesarean section. This is a very basic surgery which all of you should know in detail, and I am here to just help you out with basically understanding this concept and discussing the questions that have come on this topic. Now, one second. So, before we continue, I would request everybody to subscribe to my channel. You will get to see much more interesting topics being discussed, especially with NEETPG being around the corner. Okay, so now let's put the topic of steps of cesarean delivery. We will be playing a video simultaneously and be able to understand better with the video being played simultaneously and understand the important topics. Now, coming to first, very important, the steps of a cesarean section. So, we basically have a lower segment cesarean section, which you can see here. So, that basically refers to the incision that is given in the lower segment of the uterus. And we have an upper segment cesarean section, that is a classical cesarean section, as you can see here. Apart from these two, we also have what is called a J-shaped incision, which is a transverse incision which goes into a J like this. We have an inverted T like this. Okay, and we have a low vertical lower segment incision, something like this. The vertical incision is limited to the lower uterine segment. But the most common, of course, we all know is the lower segment transverse incision, also called as the Kerr's incision, as against the classical cesarean, which is given very rarely and which should ideally be avoided because the risk of rupture in subsequent pregnancies following a classical cesarean is 4 to 9%. Following a lower segment incision, it is 1 to 2%. Some books say 0.2 to 1%. So basically less than 2%. So a much lesser incidence of scar rupture following a lower segment cesarean, whereas following a classical, the incidence of rupture is much, much higher and hence it needs to be avoided. Also, I would like to tell here the important indications of doing a classical. So, we may sometimes have to resort to a classical, and when do we do that? If we have, say, a large obstruction to the lower segment, like a large fibroid. So the first important indication of an upper segment or a classical is a fibroid in the lower uterine segment, which is obstructing. We can't give an incision there. Secondly, we can have adhesions, so dense adhesions in the lower uterine segment. Say she's had previous multiple cesareans or multiple pelvic surgeries, and if you can't, and if there are many adhesions, you may end up injuring adjoining structures like the bladder. Third is accreta syndrome. So accreta syndromes are like placenta infeta, percreta, accreta, where we have the placenta in the lower segment and it is adherent. So you don't want to end up handling the placenta. You can end up in torrential bleeding. So we give a classical cesarean, take the baby out, and usually resort to a hysterectomy without even touching the placenta. Fourth indication is carcinoma cervix. If the woman has cervical malignancy, we avoid giving the incision in the lower uterine segment for fear of spread of the malignancy, or the malignancy may have already spread to the lower uterine segment. And fifth, which is not very common, but sometimes we have to resort to it if we have an anterior placenta previa with the baby in transverse lie, then also we may have to give a classical cesarean section. So remember these important points: the incidence of rupture 4 to 9%, here it is 1 to 2%, and remember these indications of a classical cesarean section. These are very, very important. Okay. Now coming to the steps of a cesarean section. So the first thing, obviously, after painting the abdomen and draping the parts, we have to give a skin incision. Now we have three important incisions you should know. One is the fan and steel. This is the most common. We have the Joel-Cohen incision, and we have a vertical midline subapical incision. So this is a fan and steel. It is also called a curvilinear or a smiling incision. It has very good cosmetic appeal because it is along the lines of the abdomen and it has good healing and it is barely visible. It is just above the pubic symphysis in a curvilinear fashion. It is the most common incision given. Joel-Cohen is a little higher transverse incision. If we join the two ASIS, an imaginary line, this is 3 centimeters below that, so it's higher than the fan and steel. but below a line joining the ASIS, it is a quicker incision. So Joel Cohen identified a technique for a quick cesarean, minimal bleeding, and this is the incision he identified. And then we have a midline vertical, which is not commonly given unless say she's had a previous surgery with a midline vertical. You don't want to give an additional incision. So midline vertical, Joel Cohen and Pfannenstiel. Pfannenstiel has lesser incidence of incisional hernia and has better cosmesis. So that is why Pfannenstiel is preferred over the other incisions. Okay. And what do we use to give the incision? We've all seen a BP handle and a blade. So a Bart Parker handle, knife and a blade is used to give the incision. This has also been asked as a question. So you should know that's how a BP handle looks like. Next, what do we do? Once we cut the skin, the subcutaneous tissue, we encounter a pearly white structure. As you can see in the video, it is the rectus sheath. So the rectus sheath is a tough structure, and for all tough structures in surgery, we use this instrument to hold the rectus sheath. This is called a Alice forceps. You can see it has teeth at the end. It is slightly triangular at the end, and it is an Alice forceps. It is used to hold tough structures like the rectus sheath in the cesarean section. We also use it to hold the angles of the uterus once we give the uterine incision. So once we cut the rectus sheath, we separate the rectus sheath from the underlying rectus muscle. Okay, so you can see that being done in the video. And once the rectus sheath is separated from the rectus muscle, we simply separate the bellies of the two rectus muscle, and then we encounter the underlying parietal peritoneum. So skin incision, rectus sheath, separate the rectus muscle from the sheath by holding the rectus sheath with the Alice forceps, and then separate the two bellies of the rectus muscle, and you will encounter the parietal peritoneum. That is how we enter the abdomen. So now we've entered the abdomen, we open the parietal peritoneum, we give a nick in the peritoneum, as you can see, and the parietal peritoneum is opened up. Once the parietal peritoneum is opened up, we introduce this instrument. This is a Doyen's retractor, and this has also come several times in the exams to identify this instrument. This is a Doyen's retractor. It is a relatively atraumatic curved end, and when we insert it into the lower part of the abdomen, it keeps the bladder away from the surgical field and it helps us identify the lower uterine segment. So you can see in this diagram, this is the lower uterine segment. In front of the lower uterine segment is the bladder. Okay, so once we put the instrument, the Doyen's retractor, this will keep the bladder away from view, and we'll be able to identify the lower uterine segment. But we still have to cut the visceral peritoneum, which is overlying that lower uterine segment. We identify the utrovesical fold of peritoneum, which is visceral peritoneum. How do we identify it? You can see in the video. We lift up the loose fold of peritoneum. That is the UV fold. So loose fold of peritoneum is the UV fold of peritoneum. We give a nick in it, extend it, and then we push the bladder down. Once we push the bladder down, to make sure it remains away from the field of surgery, it doesn't keep coming up, we advance the Doyen's retractor, and this keeps the bladder away from our field of surgery. So now we can easily give our lower uterine segment incision. That is the Kerr's incision or the uterine incision, the lower segment, which is a transverse incision. So once we give the transverse incision, you can see amniotic fluid, the membranes ruptured. Once the membranes rupture, we put our hand inside and we deliver the baby if it is cephalic presentation, as you can see in the video. So the baby is delivered. Once the baby is delivered, we clamp and cut the cord. Once the cords are clamped and cut, we wait for placental separation, remove the placenta, and then it is time for closure of the abdomen. So the same way we opened, the same way we close. So we first have to close the uterine incision. Now the uterine incision, so this was the uterus. If this is the uterus, this is the uterus. Okay, so this was the incision on the uterus. So these are the angles. So these angles have to be held now with either an Alice forceps, but a better forceps to use is the green Armitage forceps. This is the green Armitage forceps. You can see it has a much larger surface area and it doesn't have teeth. It is atraumatic. So if a vessel has been avulsed, like the uterine artery has been injured, because the uterine arteries are where the angles are, or if you have bleeding edges, this will hold a much larger surface area without causing more trauma. and it will stop the bleeding. So green Armitage forceps specifically designed for holding the edges of a uterine incision following a cesarean section. So remember the green Armitage forceps, and we hold the angles with the green Armitage forceps, and then we suture the uterine incision either in a single layer or in two layers. Both are correct depending on the surgeon's preference, either a single layer or a double layer. And this is the green Armitage forceps, as you can see, and this is how the uterus is closed. You can see in the video also, it is closed using delayed absorbable sutures, either in a single layer or in a double layer. So once we close the uterine incision, then we can choose to close the parietal peritoneum. Many surgeons don't, but it can be closed. Very important structure which you should know, which you should be closed properly, is the rectus sheath. The pearly white structure, remember, which we cut, if that is not sutured, there is a risk of incisional hernia. So the rectus sheath is the next structure to be closed, and then the skin, you can see the rectus sheath being closed, and then the skin is closed using subcuticular sutures or even mattress sutures or even staples. So this what is being shown here and in the video also is closure of the skin using subcuticular sutures. So these are the steps of a cesarean section, and I hope you understood the procedure better and you can answer all questions that come that are asked on it. It's a very simple procedure and it's very easy to understand. So let's discuss a few questions that have come in the previous exam. The first is, what is the incidence of scar rupture in a previous lower segment cesarean section? So remember we discussed this, it is 1 to 2%. 4 to 9% is the incidence of scar rupture in a previous classical cesarean, and that is why we want to avoid doing classical cesareans, because they can end up in a high percentage of women, they can end up in uterine rupture. And this came in NEETPG 2016. This we just discussed. Now it's a very easy question. This is a Doyne's retractor. Look at it carefully. Where is it used? Yes, it is used in a lower segment cesarean section. It helps keep the bladder away from the field of surgery, because our incision is in the lower uterine segment. We don't want the bladder coming into our way, and it is used basically to prevent injury to the urinary bladder. This is an INICET question discussed in our previous video too. So enlist the instruments you will use in a cesarean section. So let's see them one by one. Will you use a Doyne's retractor? Yes. Will you use a BP knife and handle? Yes. Will you use a Shirotka's clamp? No. What's a Shirotka's clamp? It is a uterine clamp used to hold the uterus. It is used in hysterectomies. It is used in oncosurgeries like a Wertheim's hysterectomy, but it is not used in a cesarean section. We use a Carmen's cannula? No. Carmen's cannula, and we will show you these instruments in our class on instruments and also in our class on MTP. A Carmen's cannula is used for MTP, okay, medical termination of pregnancy. Cusco speculum is used to visualize the cervix, like when you're taking a pap smear. It is commonly used in the OPD. Green Armitage, yes, we just saw this, and an Alice forceps, yes. So what is the answer? A, B, F, and G. So these are the instruments which are used in a cesarean section, and now I hope you understand this question much better now that you've seen a video on a cesarean section. Last question, it is not really related to steps of a cesarean section, but it is very important because it came last year INICET and it was a very unexpected question. So now that it's come, it's something which you can't miss now. It is a very good chance it will get repeated. So what is modified Robson's classification class 1? Is it nulliparous, singleton, cephalic, spontaneous, nulliparous, singleton, cephalic, spontaneous, induced? Is it multiparous, spontaneous? Is it multiparous, induced, or elective LSCS? So let's discuss this in a bit more detail. This table now becomes very important. It is not even there in most of your standard textbooks, but since it's been asked, now you should know this, and you should know this very well. Stick this chart up on top of your tables or wherever you're studying. Look at it every morning. It may seem very intimidating at first, but once you understand it, it's actually quite simple. So what is class 1? It is nulliparous, term, cephalic. So a primary gravida, term, cephalic presentation in spontaneous labor. If she ends up in a cesarean, it is Robson's class 1. Robson's class 2 is if she is induced, not spontaneous labor. If she's induced, or if she's taken up an elective LSCS, then it is or LSCS before labor, it is Robson's class 2. Similarly, class 3, class 4 the same, but it becomes multiparous excluding previous LSCS. Robson's class 5 are women who are previous LSCS. Robson's class 6 is nulliparous breech. Robson's class 7 is multiparous breech. Robson's class 8 are twin pregnancies or triplets. So all multiple pregnancy comes under Robson's class 8. All abnormal lies comes under Robson's class 9. So transverse lie, oblique lie, these comes under Robson's class 9. And Robson's class 10 are preterm babies. Okay, so this is Robson's class 10. So this becomes, it's not that difficult, but you need to, yes, spend some time on this. And it is important because it can be asked as a repeat question. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please subscribe to my channel. And we will have shared more in the coming months. We will share many more such videos important from your NEETPG point of view. Thank you very much.